There is a hand reaching. Watch it closely enough, and you will see something strange happen. The closer the fingers come to what they want, the more that thing seems to lean away, not fleeing, exactly, but shifting like a shadow adjusting itself to the angle of new light. You have felt this. Everyone has felt this. The sleep that will not come the harder you chase it. The love that cools the moment you grip it too tightly. The calm that dissolves the instant you demand it of yourself. There is a name old cultures gave to this pattern, in different tongues, through different symbols. Some called it the trickster's law, some called it the breath that will not be caught in a fist. We will call it tonight the law of reverse effort. Not a law of physics, not a commandment carved into stone by certain hands. A pattern noticed again and again in the quiet architecture of longing. A pattern worth sitting with, worth turning over slowly, the way you turn a stone in your palm to feel every one of its cool, uneven edges. Picture a lake at dawn, still enough to hold the whole sky inside it, if nothing disturbs the surface. Now picture a hand plunging into that water, trying to grasp the reflection of the moon. The hand closes. The reflection scatters. What was whole a moment ago becomes 100 trembling pieces, and the moon itself, untouched, indifferent, goes on hanging in the actual sky, exactly where it always was. This is the shape of wanting too hard. It is not that the moon refuses us. It is that our reaching disturbs the very water that was showing it to us clearly. Think of a person alone in a room, willing themselves towards sleep. The body grows tense with trying. The mind counts, calculates, negotiates. And somewhere in that effort, sleep, which asks for nothing but surrender, slips further away, like a cat that will not come when called, only when ignored. Or think of the artist, staring at a blank page, straining for the perfect sentence. The straining itself becomes a wall. Then later walking, thinking of something else entirely. The sentence arrives, unbidden, almost bored with how easily it came. Why does this happen? Why does the universe, or the mind, or the self, whichever word you prefer tonight, seem to withdraw exactly what we chase and offer freely what we have stopped demanding? This is not a trick of fate, and it is not proof that wanting is wrong. It may simply be the shape of certain doors, doors that open outward, so that pushing only seals them tighter, and only a step back gives them room to swing. Sit with that image for a moment. A door that opens outward. How many of us have spent years pushing against exactly the door that only asked to be released? The question, then, is not whether to want. The question is what our wanting does to the space around the thing we want. And that is where this reflection begins. There is another image worth holding here, before we go further. A bird, startled, does not fly away because you approached. It flies because of the speed in your approach, the sudden shift in the air that says, danger, danger, close now. Move slowly enough, and the same bird might let you within arm's reach. The world, in this sense, is not unlike the bird. It responds less to what we want, and more to how loudly our wanting moves through the air around it. Some nights this feels unbearable. To be told, in effect, that the very energy of your longing might be pushing away the thing you long for. This can feel like one more impossible standard, one more way to fail. But that is not quite the shape of it. This is not a demand for a perfect calm. It is only an invitation to notice, gently, without judgment, where the grip has become tighter than the moment requires. Consider first the symbol on the surface, the outer skin of this pattern, the part everyone half recognizes. In old stories, the hero who chases glory too openly is the one glory abandons. The one who forgets the treasure, who wanders instead towards some smaller, humbler task, is the one who stumbles onto it by accident. This shows up again and again across unrelated traditions, not because one culture copied another, but because the pattern was there to be noticed independently, the way every civilization eventually notices that fire burns and water flows downhill. The chase itself carries a scent. Desperation has a texture you can almost smell on a person, a tightness in the shoulders, a hunger in the eyes that others, and perhaps the world itself, instinctively step back from. We have all met someone whose need for approval was so loud it drowned out anything approvable in them. We have all, if we are honest, been that person at some hour of some year. Old maps of the sky told similar stories in their own symbolic language. A wandering star chased too eagerly by a hunter, always staying one step beyond his spear. A treasure guarded not by any creature, but by the seeker's own trembling hands, unable to hold what they had finally reached because holding itself had become the problem. These are not claims about what truly happened in any sky or any cave. They are simply old pictures, drawn by people who noticed the same ache we are noticing now, and who reached for image rather than explanation, the way people have always done when a feeling outran their words. Even the body knows this pattern before the mind names it. A muscle gripped too long begins to shake, to fail at the very task it was gripping to accomplish. A voice straining too hard to sound calm cracks exactly at the word calm. The body, in its wisdom, keeps confessing what the mind keeps denying. That force, past a certain threshold, defeats its own purpose. And here the image changes shape because underneath the outer symbol is something closer to the bone. The second layer is not about what we chase. It is about why we chase it. Effort, when it turns frantic, is rarely about the object at all. It is about an absence the object is meant to fill. The job we chase too hard is rarely just a job. It is a stand-in for the feeling of being chosen, of mattering, of having proven something to a version of ourselves that still doubts. The love we grasp too tightly is rarely just love. It is a bandage pressed hard against an old wound, hoping pressure alone will heal what pressure only ever irritates further. This is the deeper mechanism. The thing we chase becomes, without our noticing, a mask for the thing we actually lack. And masks, worn too eagerly, tend to slip. There is a story, not history, but a kind of parable passed through many mouths, of a woman who spent years seeking recognition. She built and built, achievement stacked on achievement, each one meant to finally quiet the voice inside that whispered, "Not enough, not enough." And the more she built, the louder the whisper grew. Because the whisper was never actually about achievement. It was about a childhood table where her name was rarely spoken first. No amount of new applause could reach backward into that old room and rewrite what was said or unsaid at that table. This is the second layer. Beneath the visible chase is an invisible ache, and the ache does not respond to speed. It responds to attention. The tighter the grip on the outer prize, the less attention remains for the inner wound. And wounds, like children left in another room, only cry louder the longer they are ignored. There is a strange arithmetic at work here, one worth sitting with. The more the outer object is asked to answer an inner absence, the heavier it becomes to hold. A single relationship cannot carry the weight of an entire childhood's worth of unspoken longing. A single achievement cannot answer a lifetime of feeling unseen. And so the object, however good or worthy in itself, begins to buckle under a burden it was never built to carry. And something in us senses this buckling, even before we understand it, and grips harder still, as if strength alone could compensate for the wrong kind of weight. Think of water, carried in cupped hands across a long field. The tighter the fingers close, hoping to save every drop, the more the tension itself causes the water to spill between the cracks. A looser hand, oddly, often carries more, simply because it lets the water rest rather than fight the shape of the palm. This is not a metaphor asking you to stop caring about what you carry. It is only asking you to notice the difference between carrying and clenching. And now the image turns inward once more, toward the innermost layer, the personal one. The one that asks not what this means in general, but what it means for you tonight in this room with your own particular hands. What have you been chasing? Not the surface answer, the job, the person, the number on a scale, the followers, the approval, but the deeper current beneath it. What silence are you trying to fill with speed? What old absence are you trying to answer with new acquisition? This is not a question with a quick answer. It may take years to answer honestly, but the noticing itself, the willingness to ask, begins to loosen the grip even before the full answer arrives. Because grip, more than anything else, is what keeps the door sealed. Somewhere inside you, right now, something is being held too tightly. Perhaps a relationship you are trying to force into permanence. Perhaps a version of success you are trying to will into existence through sheer exhausted effort. Perhaps even this very idea, the law of reverse effort, which you might now be tempted to chase, to apply, to master, as though understanding it were itself another prize to grip. Notice that temptation. Let it be funny even. The mind that grips will try to grip the teaching about grip. What would it feel like, just for tonight, to open the hand? Not to give up on wanting. Wanting is not the enemy here, but to let the wanting breathe, to let it exist without the desperate fist wrapped around it. Here is a different image than the reaching hand we began with. A field at dusk, and a bird landing on an open palm, not because the palm chased it, but because the palm simply waited, still and unclenched, until the bird decided the hand was safe. This is the shape effort takes when it finally softens. Not absence of desire, presence held loosely. Perhaps you are thinking, right now, of a particular door in your own life, a conversation you have been forcing toward a certain outcome, a version of yourself you have been trying to will into existence through sheer exhausted repetition, as if enough pressure could finally make the shape fit. Let that door come to mind, clearly, without judgment. You do not have to release it tonight. You only have to see for a moment how tightly your hand has been resting on its handle. There is no shame in the gripping. Every hand that has ever loved something has, at some point, gripped too tightly out of fear of losing it. This is not a flaw unique to you. It is closer to a universal reflex, something almost built into the architecture of caring. The work is not to never grip. The work is only to notice when the grip has outlived its purpose, and to remember that the hand, whenever it chooses, still knows how to open. What follows now are not instructions. No secret was handed down through locked doors for these words to open. They are simply invitations, small, ordinary doorways you can step through tonight, or ignore, or return to later, whenever the grip in your own hands grows tight enough to notice. The first invitation is stillness before naming. Before you name what you want tonight, sit for 60 seconds in silence. Let the body settle before the mind starts building its list of demands. Notice what rises in you before you decide what should rise. The second invitation is the loosen hand. Literally open your palm right now and hold it open for a slow count of 10. Feel what it means, physically, to stop clenching. Ask yourself quietly, what in your life you have been holding the way your fist was just holding? And let the hand still open answer before your mind does. The third invitation is the honest question. Ask yourself what you are truly chasing beneath the thing you say you're chasing. Not the surface goal, but the ache underneath it. You do not need to answer fully tonight. Just let the question sit in the room with you, the way a guest sits at a table even before dinner is served. The fourth invitation is the practice of the unclenched weight. Choose one thing this week you've been pushing hard toward, and for just one day, do nothing toward it. Not out of despair, but out of curiosity. Watch what happens in the space you leave open. Watch whether anything moves on its own while your hands rest. The fifth invitation is naming the old table. Sit quietly and ask where this particular hunger first began. What room, what year, what unspoken sentence first planted the ache you're now trying to feed with something new? You are not trying to fix that old room tonight. You are only trying to see it clearly, the way you might finally turn on a light in a hallway you've walked through blind for years. The sixth invitation is the breath of release. Breathe in slowly for a count of 4, hold for 4, and as you exhale for a count of 6, imagine your grip loosening on whatever you have been chasing hardest. Do this 3 times. Notice whether the object of your chasing feels any different afterward, closer, further, or simply quieter. The seventh invitation is gratitude for what arrived unchast. Before sleep tonight, name one thing in your life that came to you without force. A friendship, an idea, a moment of ease. Let that memory remind your body what it feels like when something arrives on its own terms, unhurried by your hands. None of these practices are meant to grant you power over outcomes. They are simply ways of loosening the fist long enough to see what your hand was blocking. This is not a law that promises anything. It does not guarantee that what you release will return to you, or that what you chase will always flee. Life is not so tidy, and any voice that tells you otherwise is selling you a smaller world than the one you actually live in. What this reflection offers instead is simply a different way of looking. A lens, not a verdict. A way of noticing the tension in your own hands the next time something precious seems to be slipping. Some things will still slip through open hands. That is simply true, and no amount of loosening the grip erases it. But something changes in how the slipping feels when the hand was open rather than clenched. An open hand that loses something grieves cleanly. An closed fist that loses something adds the ache of having fought uselessly against a current that was never asking to be fought. There will be seasons when effort is exactly right, when the door in front of you truly does need a firm push, when the moment calls for the full weight of your hands. This reflection is not asking you to abandon effort altogether, to drift through your days with open palms and no direction. It is only asking you to learn the difference between the push that opens a door and the push that seals it shut. A difference the body usually knows before the mind admits it, if you slow down long enough to listen. Perhaps the moon in the lake was never yours to hold. Perhaps it was only ever yours to witness, to let the water stay still enough that the reflection could remain whole, undisturbed by the very hands that loved it. There is no ending here, only a pause, the kind of pause that comes not because the thought is finished, but because thoughts like this are never finished. They are only set down for a while, the way a stone is set back on the shore after being turned over in the palm long enough. Carry this lightly, if you carry it at all, not as truth carved into anything permanent. Only as a question you might ask yourself the next time your hand begins, without your noticing, to close. And perhaps that is enough for tonight. Not an answer, only an open hand, resting in the quiet, unhurried dark.